welcome to today's episode of Stand Up, and happy Taint Week. Hashtag Taint Week, everybody. We're at the end of it between Christmas and New Year's here, where really nothing needs to happen. You don't need to do anything, and you can do whatever you want. There are no rules. Time has officially stopped. Food has no calories, alcohol doesn't affect your blood, and you definitely don't need to return any emails. It's Taint Week, and I hope to see you tonight at 8 p.m. on the Zoom for our own stand-up New Year's Eve party. 8 p.m. If you're a subscriber, you should get an email with a link to it. And don't forget, join us for PODJAM, March 28th to 30th, in person. We're going to have some of our favorite guests joining us there, taping episodes of the show, taping interviews in front of you, plus all kinds of live performances and activities. It's going to be a 3-day experience. Any questions, email me, standupwithpete@gmail.com. Tickets are available in the show notes. Get them now. Well, today's episode is kind of unique in that I don't actually have a guest. I wasn't planning on posting the show today because I was driving back from my parents where we were in Syracuse for Christmas. But I've been listening and to a whole bunch of different things, podcasts, and reading so much over these past several days that I wanted to share it with you because I felt like it was really interesting, thoughtful, and informative and helpful. That's kind of what I do here. I regurgitate information from the smartest minds in the world, dead or alive. And today I've got a good bit of that. So yeah, it's a little bit different. For this Monday, the second to last day of December. Of the rest of the week, I think I'll probably be posting interviews, and then next week I'll get back to our regular format with what I think will be a bit of a twist, if I'm being honest, if I can get it together. So with all that said here at the beginning, I hope that you had a good Christmas. I hope that you're planning something fun, or hey, nothing at all for New Year's. And I hope that your taint is bright or dark. It doesn't really matter. That's where we start today. The metaphor of lightness and darkness having to mean good and bad. I'll have headlines, and I'll read a few things from Jimmy Carter, who, of course, passed away at age 100 yesterday. And there's a few clips I want to play for you. But this idea of lightness and darkness, I want to visit this because normally at the beginning of the show, I do what's called the good stuff. And that's kind of what I'm doing here, sharing this one clips here from this podcast that is hosted by an old friend of mine, Sean Illing, who I reached out after I listened to this and said, man, you are doing great work. The podcast is called The Gray Area. It's on the Vox Network. Sean used to join me all the time. He's a former Air Force. He served in the Air Force, and he's a philosophy professor and a writer, and this podcast is real good that he's been hosting for years now. But this episode was originally from 2023, and he brought it back this month, and he says he's going to probably do it every year around this time, where he talks to this great philosophy professor named Mariana Alessandri, who is a professor at the University of Texas. And she's the author of this new book called Night Vision, Seeing Ourselves Through Dark Moods. And the book is kind of a rebuke of what people sometimes call toxic positivity. And I realize that I'm doing some of that here in the good stuff at the opening of the show. And I'm not going to stop because I think this is really helpful. But I do want to give different or wider perspective on all of this. And I think it's done really well in this new book. And Sean does a great job talking about it with Mariana Alessandri. And I just wanted to play a clip of it. And I hope that you'll go read the book, and I'll get her on hopefully, but I hope you'll go listen to and subscribe to Sean's podcast. But here it is. Let's get started with this clip from The Gray Area with Sean Illing. The episode's called What to Do with Your Sadness, Pain, and Grief. And I thought this was very interesting. I like the cultural criticism of toxic positivity and the self-help industry, which I will continue to subscribe to in many ways. But still, I thought this was very good and helpful.
You do something in the book that is a sort of a hobby horse of mine, and I'm always here for anyone who's willing to do it, which is basically take a shit on what we think of as the self-help industry. We have these books that sort of peddle this very crude version of, I guess, toxic positivity, we'll call it. I guess that's the phrase. What's your beef with these sorts of books, the sorts of books that not just imbibe this idea that light is good and sadness is dark and bad, but these sorts of books that traffic in this idea that you really are in control of your own happiness, and to the extent you're not happy, it's your fault.
That's it in a nutshell. And the thing is, I love self-help books. Like, I love them. And I am drawn into them in the same way I'm drawn into Marcus Aurelius. I love someone telling me, hey, you know what? You're not a victim. You can get better. You can feel better. Just do these things. These things worked for me. They can work for you. So the sense of empowerment they give, it's really the author saying, hey, you know what? I was in that place too, and I got myself out of it. And so I'm going to help you get out of it. And so a lot of the authors, I quote a few self-help authors, I don't think they're bad people.
Yeah.
I think they're confused into thinking that they made their own way out of it. Whereas we talk about privilege, we talk about luck, we talk about other people. And at this point, they're being sustained on the backs of people who think they're broken. So I go into the store, I feel broken. I go to the self-help aisle, right? Like it looks like someone's going to help me get unbroken. And then they make money, right? So they actually need me to feel bad. They need me to suffer, and they need me to feel like it's my fault that I'm suffering. They need me to feel bad about it, that I am in control of it and I want to be just like them. And now a lot of these people are super rich, but now they're definitely peddling because they're dependent on us in the same way that a lot of industries benefit off of people who are suffering. I mean, I'm quoting someone who says, if you're not happy, then it's on you. And I just think, wow, is that a bold claim? Is that such a huge claim to make because you think that happiness is within 100% within your control? That is incredible. That's like purely stoic and very dangerous for a sufferer to read.
And there's got to be some kinship between the light metaphor and the way Americans understand themselves that makes this place such fertile ground for this. You know, I mean, you mentioned the power of positive thinking, the famous book by Norman Vincent Peale, which came out in like the 50s. And it's sort of the foundational text of this whole genre. And I'm sure there's just a ton to be said about how those kinds of ideas really did shape post-war America and helped cultivate and cement all of these sort of attitudes and dispositions or whatever.
Yeah, I think the U.S. is a bizarre mix of stoicism, like the revival of stoicism that's so hot, you know, not just in California, but all over the world.
Yeah.
But specifically for the U.S., stoicism says, choose happy. You get to be happy if you want to. But they're very careful. They say you can't control most of things. You can only control yourself, your virtue, what you put into the world. So they're actually more careful than most Americans who sort of peddle similar theories. But it's stoicism plus Peale, exactly. 1952, power of positive thinking. So if the Stoics say, you know what, you can't control your outside circumstances, Peale is like, no, you can. If you actually think positively enough, you can get that job. And if you didn't get that job, this is the brokenness story. If you didn't get that job, it's because you weren't trying hard enough. You weren't positive enough. You had some negativity, pessimism. You influenced it. With that attitude, you're never going to get where you want to be.
All right. Well, I thought that was great, and there's so much more to it, but just a little preview, and you should go listen to and subscribe to Sean's podcast. I'll try to get him and Mariana Alessandri, the philosophy professor you heard talking here on Stand Up real soon. Okay, well, let's do some comedy, shall we? Some real smart comedy. Barry Ritholtz sent me this clip from comedian Ronnie Chang, who is, of course, a correspondent on The Daily Show, but he's got, I guess this is a new comedy special. It's called Love to Hate It. It's on Netflix, but this is like one of the smarter bits I've heard in a very long time. He breaks down the kind of thinking of MAGA worshiping Americans and points to the importance of nuance and learning and reading and trying to solve problems as opposed to just name calling and emotions. He does it in about just under 3 minutes. It's so good. And I think this whole special is good. Rarely have I seen a clip and be like, I got to go watch that whole special. But the Ronnie Chang in this clip made me want to do just that. Here it is.
MAGA, make America great again. They have a point. America is not doing so great right now, right? Our kids' math scores are down. Our children's science scores are down. When judged according to international metrics, healthcare system's not doing so great. Wealth gap disparities increasing exponentially. There was an implied promise to a generation of Americans that if you do certain things, work hard, go to college, be a good person, you would have certain outcomes. And those outcomes didn't materialize for a majority of people because baby boomers entrenched in decision-making positions lowered the capital gains tax. So that their net worth essentially compounds year after year. and post-World War II U.S. leadership traded the domestic manufacturing industry for national security by making the U.S. dollar the default international trade currency, which gave America the ability to impose economic sanctions on foreign countries through a U.S. financial banking system, but consequently increased the value of the U.S. dollar astronomically, which made it impossible for anyone to manufacture anything in America. Although the logic at the time was that Americans were supposed to upskill en masse away from the menial manufacturing jobs. But everyone here's too much of a dumbass to stay in school, so we just traded domestic manufacturing to Asia and the rest of the world at the expense of working class families. But if you don't read enough, it comes out as, let's go, Brandon! And it's like you have a point, but you don't have the vocabulary to describe your reality because you didn't read enough. You gotta keep reading. Beyond the hashtag, there's a book behind the word. You gotta keep going. You can go at your own pace, but you gotta finish the required reading, otherwise we can't have a conversation. It's just, we're all catching up to each other. Very, very passionate people, my MAGA friends. And I respect their passion to some extent. I do. They're like, man, Ronnie, I love America. I would die for this country. And I believe them. I believe they love America. And I believe they would die for this country, which is very admirable. But it's like, man, you're willing to die for your country. Why aren't you willing to learn math? Also for your country. Like do both for your country. Because I know you want to die for your country, but we're losing the engineering jobs to Asia right now. So we need less people to die for the country. You want people to do their homework for the country. Like do your homework for your country. Like actually sit down and show the working and like do that's a more efficient way to show your patriotism. Like I know if you take that I want to die energy and you put it into homework, you will fucking top the school. I'm telling you, it's sky's the limit. You'll solve a lot of problems. You'll create a lot of jobs. You'll increase the GDP. Okay, just like do your homework for your country. I'd rather die. I thought so. I thought that might be the case. Dying's easy. Math is hard.
Dying is easy. Math is hard. Isn't that true? Yeah, I love it. I love that clip, and you should go watch the whole special on Netflix now. All right, well, let's go from something thought-provoking and hilarious to a political analysis from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who appeared on my friend Sam Cedar's show, The Majority Report. I think it was last week or the week before, but I just thought this was a brilliant question from Sam. Actually, his daughter asked him to ask this, but I really enjoyed and got a lot out of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's answer. Very nuanced answer to what she sees as her role as a congresswoman in the Democratic Party representing New York's 14th district. This is great. I loved it. I felt it was a kind of language that helped me understand exactly why I personally support someone as brilliant, nuanced, thoughtful, and effective as AOC is.
I want to turn to what's been going on this week in terms of your attempt to chair the government oversight committee. And my daughter had a question that sort of dovetails into this. So I told her I would ask this question. She wants to know, and I think sort of these two questions sort of address that whole dynamic. One is if you feel abandoned by the Democratic Party, and how so if you do. But also, she wants to know, how do you grapple with having to appeal to multiple different ideological groups within the Democratic Party and your constituency?
Yeah, well, two really good questions. The first one is that I don't really feel abandoned by the Democratic Party because my primary relationship that I care about the most is mass movement and mass movement politics. And part of my job and my role exists forever in this tension point between mass movements and everyday people and the establishment of the Democratic Party. And so that is always like, as long as I exist as a person, I am going to be in this waypoint between these two forces. And what I'm always trying to do is open the windows of possibility for people in the Democratic Party. And so I don't feel abandoned because my job is not to try to gain personal acceptance. My job is to try to build power for the working class. And so I feel like you have to know when to select your battles and when to force the question. And I ran to win. I always run to win. I don't pick fights that I think are losing from the jump, even if they are long shots. But I also felt like this was a win-win situation. And I felt like it was win-win because you win it in a literal sense. We're able to wield this seat. And I think I genuinely ran because I thought it was what was best for the party. And I think it was what was best for the country. And I think it was what was best for people. And that's why I did it. But I also think that it is clarifying. And sometimes when you force this question, it allows us to take measurements about where we are at. And not in a binary perspective, not just in a binary perspective either. It's not just that we won or that we lost. But even in losing, I don't think anybody in the party thought that it would be this close at the start. This is a race among, by definition, Democratic insiders, only among other members of Congress. And this is typically an environment where people like us get crushed. And the fact that it was this close, the fact that some of the most, established and powerful elements of the party had to mobilize to make this result, happen, that we, people were hot on their heels, I think is a very good sign for us. And so that's the first question, which leads to the second question, right, is that in order for us to win, we need to win along several dimensions. And we need to know how to bring people together and cleave people together in kind of different dimensions in addition to an ideological one. If it's forever just progressives versus the establishment, and that's the only frame, then we are outnumbered. But if we can take that, preserve it, we're not abandoning it, but you add generational dimensions, you add class dimensions, you add some of these other things. This is an exercise in coalition building while preserving the integrity of our positions. And I think this was one of our first big swings at it. And I think as far as that goes, there was a lot of really interesting successes in that.
And she goes on to answer the rest of Sam's daughter's question there. And it's, I think, like a 30-minute interview. I highly recommend you go watch or listen to all of that at Sam Seder's The Majority Report. And now I want to head to TikTok for a different kind of analysis. I don't know where I got this. I think I just found it, discovered it somehow, or TikTok fed it to me. I don't even know why I was on TikTok. I don't spend that much time over there, and I'm glad I haven't invested in it because it might all go away in just a couple of weeks. The Supreme Court, Trump asked the Supreme Court to delay TikTok's sale deadline. So we'll see what happens with that. But anyway, I thought this kid was really smart. He's a youngish, I think he's early 20s white kid. I think, yeah, he's like 21 because he said he was 14 when Trump got elected first in 2016. And I love this. I don't know if it translates as well here on the podcast. He keeps pressing the button. It's like he's taping it in 30-second chunks or something like that. But anyway, his name is Presto Masso is his handle on TikTok. And I couldn't find out much more about him in my short search, but Presto Masso, Presto-Masso. I thought this was very interesting, the way that he breaks down his own political birth and maturing and ends up just kind of trying to help redefine and define what it means to be a man and masculinity. I ate it up. I thought it was really good. And so I thought you might want to share this with young men in your life and others. Here it is.
I was 14 when Donald Trump defeated Hillary Clinton in the 2016 election and became the 45th president of the United States. I grew up in a very conservative area, And me and all my friends, young teenage boys, were of course very conservative, and all we were excited about was making fun of the triggered people online who were crying hysterically and thought the world was ending. I love watching those Ben Shapiro owns the SJW Warriors compilation, and Charlie Kirk puts a, dumb college kid to shame, like those types of videos. You guys know what I'm talking about. Not coincidentally, this was a time when I was also bullied a lot. I was super insecure about myself, and I felt very hollow and empty inside a lot of the time. So to avoid being bullied by others, I find myself being increasingly intolerant and hateful towards other people so that I wouldn't get bullied, but those people would get bullied. And I feel like this really aligned with how my political beliefs were at the time. It was this zero-sum game where either me or them could escape this social shame, and I would subscribe to anything that provided me escape from said social shame. And as I got older, the only side of the political spectrum that seemed to accept me was the right, while the left was seemingly calling me racist, sexist, misogynist at every single turn. Keep in mind, I'm only like 16 years old at this point. I have no idea or understanding of who I am, the values that are most important to me. All that I know is that I feel a lot of anger and rage towards one side of the political aisle, and that another is accepting me or even embracing me for how I feel. From a very early age, I was sold on the idea that everyone on the left was a blue-haired, triggered liberal who hated all men, who started the KAM movement, and thought that all men were racist, evil, disgusting people. Meanwhile, people on the right were openly embracing and accepting me for the person that I was at that time. And it ingrained within me almost a victimhood complex, right? Where I thought that, historically other groups have been oppressed, but in today's day and age, in today's society, it is the white man who is oppressed. I was constantly bombarded by conservative messaging saying that things like D&I and feminism were going to steal my ability from succeeding in today's society. Now, I can recognize that when you're coming from a position of privilege, equality looks a lot like oppression. But at the time, I felt very fearful of these changes, and I worried about being accepted and successful in society. Also, sorry for the outfit change. I just got back from church. Now, the first time I realized that my worldview may be skewed or maybe wrong was senior year of high school. In my English class that year, we read a book about an African-American family dealing with the consequences of redlining and white flight. Now, I would definitely recommend you do your own research about redlining, but in short, in the 1950s and the 1960s, property owners refused en masse to sell homes in the suburbs on the basis of race to African Americans, who were then forced to remain in the cities. There was a huge demand and transfer of wealth to the suburbs, so the property values of those suburbs shot up exponentially, while those in the cities fell drastically. This meant that the property values for African Americans decreased solely on the basis of their race, while the property values for white people increased solely because of their race. Now, this is a clear cold-cut indicator of systemic racism that impacts people and families to this day, and it was a real wake-up call for me. And this was the first time I realized that maybe I was wrong, and that the grievances that these communities have are actually rooted in fact and historical context. Maybe I've been misled and misinformed by the political pundits that I listen to. That was all but confirmed for me on January 6th. Instead of conceding with grace and honor like a real man, Donald Trump cried for 3 straight months after losing the 2020 election, citing baseless claims of fraud and rigging for why he lost, and blaming everyone but himself. He brought into question the sanctity of our democracy, our elections, and our institutions, and he effectively riled up his base in advance of January 6th. That same base committed violence and an insurrection on his behalf that day. And as I was watching that unfold on television, I thought to myself, wow, how can these people be doing this? How can they believe the things that are coming out of his mouth? And then I realized that up until a few months ago, I was the same way. I believed the exact same things that those people believed, and they were storming the Capitol. Now, the main takeaway I had from all of this is that Trump benefits from the rage and the anger and the spitefulness amongst young men. It helps him win elections. Conservative pundits like Charlie Kirk and Ben Shapiro make their livings and careers off the frustrations and grievances that young men feel. Elon Musk gets billions of dollars of government subsidies and tax cuts because young men are angry at women and immigrants and not billionaires. My point being, everyone on the right directly benefits from the disenfranchisement that young men feel. So why would they ever attempt to solve it? Why would they provide meaningful solutions for you and me when they make money and win elections capitalizing off your anger and frustration? They won't. They will only provide you with new enemies to channel your frustrations onto, but never the ones that are actually causing it, themselves. It's not a coincidence that the more young men follow people like Donald Trump, Elon Musk, Charlie Kirk, and Ben Shapiro, the more angry and frustrated they will become. Therefore, I think it's really important as men that we look inwards at the anger and frustrations that we feel, rather than projecting that onto others or looking for others to blame. Calm your mind, calm your heart, Listen to those that you disagree with, and empathize with those you don't understand. It is not masculine to be embroiled with anger and rage. It is not masculine to bully the downtrodden or the oppressed. It is masculine to regulate your emotions. It is masculine to show empathy for others. Be a rock against the waves. Do not allow those who stand to profit off of your anger exploit you and only further those emotions. My hope for young men is that you pay close attention to the next 4 years under a Trump presidency. Focus on what material benefits a Trump presidency brings you. If you didn't get to see liberals cry or scream because Trump got elected, if you didn't get to see college students getting owned by Charlie Kirk on campuses across the country, or if you didn't espouse hateful things with the specific intent of upsetting others, what would your top political priorities be? His promises of lowering gas and grocery prices will not happen given his proposed economic platform. Trump will not lower the cost of housing, of healthcare, or your taxes. He is not working for you. He is profiting off of you. When your entire ideology is structured around making others sad and unhappy, you will not find peace within yourself or happiness in your own life. Escaping the pitfalls of the far right has made me a better man, more secure with myself, and happy with the world around me. If any of this resonates with you, know that you are not alone.
Oh, there you go. Wow. Presto Masso on TikTok is that young 21-year-old's name. And if you want me to even send you that link, I'll probably try to remember to put it in the show notes because these are all in my notes. I did a lot of scrolling over the past Taint week and found things like this. This is an old George Carlin clip talking about the Republican Party. He was a critic of all political parties, Democrats obviously as well, politics in general, capitalism, you name it. But I thought this was dead on still to this day.
You know, the difference that I define the difference between right wing and left wing. People to the right of center. Well, let's start with the people to the left. People to the left of center, liberals, Democrats, populists, they're interested in people, human beings and human values. People to the right of the line, Republicans and rich people and right-wingers, they're interested in property, not people. And they're soulless. They're without soul. They don't really care. These Christians don't do Jesus' work, which is to feed the poor and take care of the ones who can't help themselves. That's what their Jesus said. Feed those who have no way. Ones who have nothing going for them. Help them in my name. Don't even want to know about it. Where's that tax return? I want my what do they call it? The rebate. It's goofy. It's just goofy.
Oh, I miss him so much. Oh, I love it. Tax credit, I think he was talking about. Certainly some things have changed since he made that specific criticism, obviously, but that's still a good, I think, definition of at least a major strain of the Republican Party, the ones that are basically in charge, billionaires to be sure. Okay, well, here is Noam Chomsky. I think it must have fed me this next because it was just smart people I'm a fan of shitting on conservative right-wing Republican Party politics. So I guess that's my silo. Here he is, one of the most intellectual minds of our time, still with us, Noam Chomsky.
The Republican Party is basically a party of the super rich, and they have to have a popular base. And one way in which they've organized the popular base is what are called in the PR industry values. Keep away from issues and focus on values. In other words, don't let people think about the fact average real wealth has actually declined for about 90% of the population. Don't let them think about that. Don't let them think about the fact that Americans have the highest workload in the world, the lowest benefits, the least social, the only country with basically no advanced country with no health services. You can't take care of your elderly mother. I mean, don't let people think about that sort of thing. Let them think about rising to heaven when all the evil has been destroyed and the souls are saved. Okay. Or let them think about having a lot of guns that they can run around with and kill all the aliens who are going to attack them or something like that. Let them think about those things, but keep away from the issues. Okay, don't deal with the fact that they really oppose these corporate-run globalization systems. Everybody opposes them, so let's not talk about them. And in fact, let's just keep away from all the issues and focus on values. So yeah, you get a mobilization of the extremist fundamentalist group, which is big in the United States.
All right, Chomsky as well, still relevant and accurate in my opinion. What are your thoughts? What are they? All right, well, who sent me this? This is just some guy on TikTok defining Taint Week. Although he doesn't use those words, he's still talking about this week. I thought it resonated with the way I described it very similarly.
Welcome to the week between Christmas and New Year's. Here are the rules. You are required to watch a minimum of one season of a TV show. You can wear stretchy pants to any event, no matter how formal. If you go to the gym, never mention it. There are no days of the week. There is no time. And you can eat whatever you want, whenever you want. Steak and vodka in the morning, eggs and bacon at night. There are no meals. There's no breakfast. There's no lunch. There's no dinner. The only time we will look at a clock is the last 10 seconds of the year. And if you're single, that's the moment you're searching around to see which rando you're going to hug awkwardly at midnight. Welcome to the Thunderdome.
All right. Welcome to the Thunderdome indeed. And now it's on to Jimmy Carter, everybody. You know what I'm just going to do? I'm going to read the statements from President Biden and Kamala Harris and every ex-president from Bush and Obama and Clinton. Everybody has been saying all kinds, putting out statements. And I've got them, and then I've got an article from the Washington Post with a whole bunch of interesting things about Jimmy Carter. I'm just going to read all those to you, and that is going to be my coverage here on Stand Up of Jimmy Carter, who I had great admiration for and who was the definition of a real Christian, living his word and doing what Jesus would say. I think it's fair. One fair interpretation. He lived modestly. He was just a really good guy for so many different reasons. I admired him a lot, and clearly so did many Americans. So here first is President Biden and Joe Biden, First Lady Joe Biden, their statement. Let me read that to you. Today, America and the world lost an extraordinary leader, statesman, and humanitarian. Over 6 decades, we had the honor of calling Jimmy Carter a dear friend. But what's extraordinary about Jimmy Carter, though, is that millions of people throughout America and the world who never met him thought of him as a dear friend as well. With his compassion and moral clarity, he worked to eradicate disease, forge peace, advance civil rights and human rights, promote free and fair elections, house the homeless, and always advocate for the least amongst us. He saved, lifted, and changed the lives of people all across the globe. He was a man of great character and courage, hope, and optimism. We will always cherish seeing him and Rosalind together. The love shared between Jimmy and Rosalind Carter is the definition of partnership, and their humble leadership is the definition of patriotism. We will miss them both dearly, but take solace knowing they are reunited once again and will remain forever in our hearts. To the entire Carter family, we send our gratitude for sharing them with America and to the world. To their staff, from the earliest days to the final ones, we have no doubt that you will continue to do good works that carry on their legacy. And to all the young people in this nation, and for anyone in search of what it means to live a life of purpose and meaning, the good life, study Jimmy Carter, a man of principle, faith, and humility. He showed that we are a great nation because we are a good people, decent and honorable, courageous and compassionate, humble and strong. To honor a great American, I will be ordering an official state funeral to be held in Washington, D.C. for James Earl Carter, Jr., 39th President of the United States, 76th Governor of Georgia, Lieutenant of the United States Navy, graduate of the United States Naval Academy, and favorite son of Plains, Georgia, who gave his full life in service to God and country. All right, there you go. That's from Joe and Joe Biden, who is still president for a few more days. And now here is the woman we hoped would be president, Kamala Harris, the vice president, also put out a statement on Jimmy Carter's passing, which I thought was great. President Jimmy Carter was guided by a deep and abiding faith in God, in America, and humanity. Jimmy Carter's life is a testament of the power of service. As a lieutenant of the United States Navy, the 76th governor of Georgia, and the 39th president of the United States, he reminded our nation and the world that there is strength in decency and compassion. Oh, I like that. There is strength in decency and compassion. If only we defined it that way, all of us, or more of us. As president, he protected our air and water, promoted transparency in government, and brokered an historic peace treaty between Egypt and Israel at Camp David. Throughout his life, President Carter was strengthened by the love and support of his partner of 77 years, First Lady Rosalind Carter, whose life President Biden and I had the opportunity to celebrate in Georgia last year. After leaving office, President Carter continued his fight for peace, democracy, and human dignity through the Carter Center. I had the privilege of knowing President Carter for years. I will always remember his kindness, wisdom, and profound grace. His life and legacy continue to inspire me and will inspire generations to come. Our world is a better place because of President Carter. Doug and I send our love and prayers to the Carter family. And the Washington Post had a really interesting piece. 11 facts about Jimmy Carter that may surprise you. The peanut farmer turned president who died Sunday at 100 put solar panels in the White House and once spent 89 seconds inside a melting nuclear reactor. Jimmy Carter, the Georgia peanut farmer who became the 39th president of the United States, was known for his no-frills lifestyle, early focus on climate change, and concerns about growing divisions in the country. During his single White House term from 1977 to 1981, almost one-third of which was clouded by the 444-day-long Iran hostage crisis, the Navy veteran brokered a historic peace accord between Egypt and Israel and pioneered renewable energy as a cheaper alternative to foreign oil. He was the first Democratic president since 1888 not to win re-election. As the United States' longest-living former president, he spent decades working to advance peace and humanitarianism, efforts for which he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Here are some facts that may surprise you about Mr. Carter, who died on Sunday at the age of 100 in Plains, Georgia. James Earl Carter Jr. was delivered on October 1st, 1924, in a 60-bed hospital in Plains, Georgia, becoming the first future president to be born in such a setting. A hospital birth may seem unremarkable today, but at the beginning of the 20th century, nearly all childbirths still took place at home, including the majority at the time of Mr. Carter's birth. His mother, Lillian, was a registered nurse at the unit in which he was delivered, and his father, James Earl, was a farmer. 4 years later, the family moved from Plains to a nearby farm where his father grew corn, cotton, peanuts, and sugarcane. When Mr. Carter was sworn into office in 1977 on a family Bible held by his wife, Rosalind Carter, he took the presidential oath of office using the name Jimmy instead of James, his actual first name, which he rarely used. Bill Clinton and Joe Biden also used their nicknames in the White House, opted to be sworn in using their full names during their inaugurations. After Mr. Carter was sworn in, the organizers of his inauguration ceremony floated a giant peanut-shaped balloon in a parade to honor his roots. Jimmy and Rosalind Carter were married longer than any other presidential couple. They were married 77 years. The day after Jimmy took Rosalind a date to the movies in 1945, he told his mother that he knew he wanted to marry Rosalind. A year later, when he was 21 and she was 18, they were married. Quote, "Over the years, we became not only friends and lovers, but partners," Rosalind said close to 7 decades later at Jimmy's 90th birthday celebration. He has always thought I could do anything. The pair had known each other for all of Rosalind's life. She lived down the road in their hometown of Plains and was a frequent playmate of Ruth Carter, Jimmy's little sister. After leaving the White House, the couple returned full-time to the house they lived in before he entered politics, a 2-bedroom rancher that is valued at less than the armored Secret Service vehicles parked outside. Rosalind Carter died in November 2023 at the age of 96. In 1979, Mr. Carter unveiled solar panels atop the White House as part of his ambitions to plan to reduce expensive oil imports by boosting U.S. use of sustainable energy. Quote, "Harnessing the power of the sun to enrich our lives as we move from our crippling dependence on foreign oil," he said at the time, "is one of the greatest and most exciting adventures ever undertaken by the American people." The panels were removed by the Reagan administration in 1986 during White House repairs. Mr. Carter had great ambitions for solar power, which he hoped by the year 2000 would account for 20% of U.S. energy needs, a goal that was not reached. Peanut One set the technological standard for campaign jets. Peanut One, otherwise known as Mr. Carter's 1976 campaign aircraft, served as headquarters for Mr. Carter's Democratic primary season when the candidate was on the move. Its specialized computer equipment designed to keep the campaign operating from 30,000 feet attracted the admiration of political journalists, including the Washington Post's David Broder. Hooked in by elaborate circuitry to the schedule, media, and organization staff in the Atlanta headquarters, Broder reported in 1976, the campaign computer was connected to polling data and newspaper records. As impressive as it is, the computer in the back takes second place to that housed in front, inside the head of Jimmy Carter. Mr. Carter was nicknamed computer-driven candidate by the Post that year, was known for a cool-headed approach to political decisions. Mr. Carter's judicial appointments were the most racially and gender diverse at the time. Mr. Carter named 57 minority judges and 41 female judges to the federal judiciary during his single term in the White House, which, according to the Carter Center, was more than all previous presidents combined. One of those judges was Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who Mr. Carter nominated in 1980 to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit. The 39th president, who came of age politically during the Civil Rights era, but came to embrace the movement publicly later in his political career, also appointed the first black woman to serve in the presidential cabinet, Patricia Roberts Harris. He was a devout Christian. He struggled with abortion, but later supported same-sex marriage. A lifelong Baptist who described himself as a born-again Christian, Mr. Carter described his faith as foundational to his politics. During his presidency, Mr. Carter's Christianity led him to personally oppose abortion, which he said he believes should not be federally funded through Medicaid, although he said he was able to live with the 1973 Roe v. Wade Supreme Court decision legalizing abortion nationwide. His faith continued to shape his positions after he left the White House, including on same-sex marriage. He said, "I believe that Jesus would approve same-sex marriage." In 2015, after those unions were declared legal by Supreme Court. Mr. Carter also moonlighted as a Sunday school teacher after leaving the White House, delivering more than 800 lessons at the Marantha Baptist Church on the edge of Plains, Georgia. The lessons delivered every 2 weeks proved so popular that congregants lined up the night before to secure seats. Jimmy Carter also made eradicating the guinea worm a personal mission. The 39th president's nonprofit organization, the Carter Center, launched its campaign to globally eradicate guinea worm disease in 1986 when there were estimated 3.5 million cases of the painful parasitic condition worldwide. There's no cure for the ancient disease, which is contracted by consuming a larval parasite in unfiltered water. Inside the body, the larva will grow into worms up to 3 feet long. Oh, my goodness. Oh, God, I didn't know it was that bad. But by 2022, just 13 cases were reported worldwide, according to the Carter Center, which for decades supported governments in promoting clean drinking water and interrupting transmission chains. Quote, "I'd like for the last guinea worm to die before I do," Mr. Carter said at a news conference in 2015. Jimmy Carter spent 89 seconds inside a nuclear reactor in meltdown. When a nuclear reactor in Ontario, Canada, exploded in 1952, spewing radioactive material into the atmosphere, the U.S. Navy deployed a team, including Mr. Carter, then a 28-year-old lieutenant who had helped develop the first nuclear submarine, to assist Canadian authorities with dismantling its partially melted core. Lieutenant Carter entered the reactor dressed in protective gear with 2 other specialists, exposing himself in 89 seconds to the same amount of radiation that the general population absorbs in 1 year. He later said his urine continued to test positive for radioactivity for 6 months. Sounds like something Trump would do. Elvis Presley called Jimmy Carter, but was too high for the president to understand him. In 2011 interview, Mr. Carter recalled that shortly after his inauguration, he received a phone call from Elvis Presley at the White House. Quote, "He was totally stoned and didn't know what he was saying. His sentences were almost incoherent," Mr. Carter told the New Yorker magazine. The singer apparently wanted the newly sworn-in president to pardon a sheriff who was in trouble with the law. Mr. Carter described himself as a personal friend of Presley's, and in 1977 said the music legend's death had deprived the country of a part of itself. Quote, "More than 20 years ago, he burst upon the scene with an impact that was unprecedented and will probably never be equaled," Mr. Carter said in a presidential statement issued upon Elvis Presley's death. And finally, British tabloids accused Jimmy Carter of breaching royal protocol by kissing the Queen Mother on the lips. What the hell? 2 years after Jimmy Carter visited Buckingham Palace in 1977, rumors have been circulating in the British press that he'd kissed the Queen Mother on the lips, which the papers considered a scandalous invasion of her personal space. He's the only man since my dear husband died to have had the effrontery to kiss me on the lips, the Queen Mother reportedly said. Mr. Carter forcefully denied the account in his memoir, insisting that his goodnight peck had been delivered lightly on the Queen Mother's cheek. However, he did say that the two of them had sex, but there was no kissing, so I'm surprised that didn't get covered. Okay, that didn't happen, and I'm sorry for the joke. The uncelebrity president. Jimmy Carter's simple and modest lifestyle was rare, in sharp contrast to his successors. He declined the corporate board memberships and lucrative speaking engagements, and decided that his income would come from writing. He wrote 33 books and helped renovate 4,300 homes for Habitat for Humanity. So there you have it. What did you think of all that reading? It wasn't better than I guessed, and maybe it's annoying. Maybe you don't like it when I do that, and maybe I don't read as well as I think I do. But I found myself listening to books on tape as well as other podcasts who read long-form articles and being completely engaged and interested and informed, enlightened by it. So hopefully I did a good job. Let me know, because I don't usually do that very often. And at times when I don't have a guest, or at other times and other spaces and places, maybe I'll do more of that, because I love sharing my favorite articles in all of the ways that I can and learning along with you every day. All right, well, that's all I've got for you on today's show. I hope to see you at tonight's Hangout, 8 p.m. You should be getting the link if you're a paid subscriber. If you don't, email me, standupwithpete@gmail.com. It'll be our New Year's Eve stand-up happy hour hangout. Hope to see you there. Jon Carroll taking us out today. Love you guys. I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Stand up. Let the brave meet the challenge. Let the meek weak flee. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. When you're tired of begging, saying pretty please, that's the time you gotta finally get up on you. trees, you got to stand up.